Hello and welcome to today's webinar, The Best Ways to Stop Malware and Ransomware That No One Else Will Tell You. This event is brought to you in partnership with KnowBe4 and produced by Actual Tech Media. We have a really cool event lined up for you today. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, just a few things that you should be aware of about the webinar. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator on the event today. We want this to be an educational event. We want you to get all your questions answered about ransomware and security awareness. And the best way to do that is to drop your question there in the questions box in your audience console. Also in the console, you'll find a couple of handouts. You'll find the social engineering red flags resource, which is really cool to print out and pass out to your employees to help them to be more aware of social engineering. You'll also find the slides for today's presentation. At the end of today's presentation, I'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card grand prize. If you're watching this on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. And without further ado, I'm excited to introduce you to today's expert presenter. That is Mr. Roger Grimes, data-driven defense evangelist at KnowBe4. Roger, it's always a pleasure to have you. Take it away.
Thanks, David, and thanks everybody for showing up today for one of my favorite webinars called The Best Ways to Stop Malware and Ransomware That No One Else Will Tell You. And I really think that if you haven't seen this before, I'm going to give you a couple of ideas to help you significantly reduce the risk of malware that no one else has ever talked about. And it doesn't, in most cases, doesn't require buying another product. It just requires configuring and doing something a little bit different. If you haven't met me before, I'm Roger Grimes. I'm the data-driven defense evangelist for KnowBe4. I talk real fast all the time, so you'll certainly see that today. And I've got about 15 minutes, and then we'll take some questions at the end. I've been doing computer security for 33 years. I've earned all of these great hairs, written 12 books and over 1,000 magazine articles on computer security. A lot of those I was the InfoWorld and CSO magazine weekly security columnist for about 15 years. Here's some of the books I've written. The latest one I've written is Hacking Multi-Factor Authentication, which has been a big hit. I work for KnowBe4. We're the world's largest security awareness training vendor. And I got to tell you, out of my 33 years, KnowBe4 is easily my favorite job ever. And today we're talking about malware, the 2 best ways to stop it that other people haven't told you about. I'm going to give you step-by-step instructions so you can, have actionable steps that you can take and do and see how it works in your environment. And we'll finish it up with, it says live malware and defense demonstration. So it's recorded, but it will certainly, it will show you everything I've talked about today. So it was live malware when I recorded it. But so the 2 best ways to stop malware, number 1 is to detect and mitigate how malware is breaking in. Almost no software or service or system gives you that answer because you must understand how malware is breaking in. And then also, just as important, to detect how long it is dwelling and where. Those are very important things that almost no anti-malware system gives you, especially of how it's breaking in. And if you don't figure out how malware is breaking in, you're never going to stop it. So essentially, we're trying to put the how, why, where, how long. Most anti-malware defenses will give you the what. It removed this ransomware family, it removed this Trojan, but they're not telling you how that thing broke in. Most of them are not telling you how long they've been in your system. There are some systems that can actually, if you decide to go back and look up and say, when did it first execute, you can find that out, but it doesn't proactively tell you. And what I'm going to show you today is to figure out and detect how it's breaking in, and also proactively find out when the malware has ever been in more than a few seconds. Because really, malware, if the malware has only been in for a few seconds, it's someone's downloading it, it gets detected in the browser and removed by the antivirus program, there's really no risk. But what most people don't know is that many times malware is in for minutes to hours to days before it's detected and removed by antivirus software. As a matter of fact, I think the latest stat I saw on ransomware is the average ransomware bot is inside of a network for up to 8 months before it's detected and removed. So it's very important to figure out how long something's in your systems, because that's really when you have the most risk. When it's detected and removed, the risk is essentially over, or at least the ability for it to increase your risk. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Most people already know the what antivirus detect and remove, but not how it got in, not where it was, not how long it was in, and then early detection of all of it. And again, no anti-malware defense is going to show you all of this. There are pieces and parts like, Microsoft has the excellent ATP, Advanced Threat Persistent Detection software that, once you know that you've been compromised by something, you can actually follow that executable through the system. That's pretty cool, but it doesn't proactively create this information workflow, security workflow that I'm going to teach you to do. And it doesn't tell you, more importantly, how something broke in. And again, if you can't figure out how something broke in, you can't stop it. And it's important to know how something broke in. This is known as the initial root cause exploit. How did the malware, or hackers for that matter, get into your environment? Because again, if you can't figure out how that thing is breaking in, you're not going to stop it. And detecting and identifying how something breaks in and closing that hole or holes is one of the most important things any computer security defender can do. As a matter of fact, I wrote a whole book on it called A Data-Driven Computer Security Defense. Wrote a whole book, and I've written white papers and probably 20 articles on it, all dedicated to people need to focus on the root cause of how something breaks in, at least as much as they do on what broke in. Because like when you're trying to get rid of malware or hackers or ransomware, like people are like, oh, how do I stop ransomware? Well, you're certainly not you're not stopping ransomware with good antivirus detection, because if that worked, nobody would ever get hit by ransomware, because almost everybody that got hit by ransomware had really good up-to-date antivirus. But ransomware is not really your problem, or the malware or the hacker. The problem is how the ransomware, the hacker, and the malware got in. That's your problem. The ransomware and the hacker in the malware getting in, that's a symptom of a computer security weakness that you have, a gap in your defenses. And so you really need to focus on how something got in if you want to stop it in the future. Or I say, let's say that you're worried about ransomware. You could remove ransomware completely. Let's say it disappeared one day, like it's a big deal now, but maybe 5 years from now, there's no ransomware. If you don't close how the ransomware is getting in, which many times because of social engineering, unpatched software, poor password policies, and other overly permissive permissions and things like that, but if you don't concentrate on how they're getting in, well, the next thing, whatever it is, whether it's past the hash attacks or some cloud-based attack or some computer virus, if you don't close the holes of how something's getting in, the next thing's just going to get in the same way. And if you don't know it, hackers and malware can break in 10 different ways. This is a list I created starting 30 years ago. I've updated the list over the years. I've renamed things and moved stuff around. But as far as I know, if every hacker attack and every malware break-in, this is how they get in, one of these 10 ways. Could be because of a programming bug in software. Most of the time, there's a patch available, but people haven't applied it yet. Or it could be a 0-day that that the victim doesn't know about, or the vendor doesn't know about, that's used. Those are not uncommon these days, but they really don't hit a lot of victims. I think the average 0-day only hits like maybe 15 victims before a patch is available and it's closed on down. Could be because of social engineering, a very popular way for malware and hackers to get in. Could be because of an authentication attack, because maybe they're guessing at passwords, or they've eavesdropping on your wireless network and picking up passwords that way, or they're catching your challenge response session communications and figuring out a password hash and then cracking the hash back to the plain text password. Could be because of data network traffic malformations. That would be like the data malformation would be like a buffer overflow. Or traffic malformation would be like a distributed denial of service attack, where they hit your web server with like 1 billion packets. Could be because of a trusted insider attack, somebody doing something to you inside your company. Oftentimes it's because of third-party reliance issues, where a contractor or vendor gets compromised, and then the attacker uses that, leverages that particular attack to take over your company. I think the most famous one I remember, it might have been Target or someone else, but their HVAC vendor hadn't changed the default password on their HVAC management software. And so the attacker broke into that and eventually were able to put in some eavesdropping Trojans that captured people's credit cards during buying transactions. Could be because of a physical attack. Someone steals somebody's laptop or steals the USB key or something like that. Or it could be some brand new attack vector. They don't normally come out a whole lot, but they do. But I've been doing this 33 years, and it is really kind of a rarity that there's some brand new type of attack. Most attacks are just existing slight improvements over older attacks that have been around for 30 years, not a whole lot of new stuff. But the key question to ask yourself and your organization is, can you correctly identify the number one initial root cause exploit? Why is malware and hackers getting into your environment? What is the number one reason, number two reason, number three reason? And if you can't answer that, particularly with data, then you're at increased risk of future attacks. You have to identify how things are breaking in your company and concentrate on closing those holes. And once you close those holes, you close everything that could use the hole, not just ransomware, but all future attacks as well. Most companies that I've consulted with over my 30 years usually have like a number one root cause exploit of why they're getting exploited. Years ago, maybe it was unpatched Java. Today, it's social engineering many times. It could be because of poor password policy or hygiene. It could be because overly permissive permissions or something like that. But almost every company that I've ever consulted with, and again, I would consult with anywhere from a couple of dozen to over 100 companies a year for 20 years. I would always see that every company had this big number one threat that was the cause for most of their breaches. And then usually a number two event, maybe or not a number three event. And number one and number two were almost always the same thing, which I'll cover in the next slide. But then the number three thing was usually different per company, but then everything else added up all together didn't account for 1 to 10% of the risk. I say that, attack risk is like bubbles in a glass of champagne, and that you've got all these attacks that could possibly take you in, but two of these bubbles are significantly larger than all the rest of the bubbles. So you need to figure out what are the top root causes for things breaking into your environment. And I have people say, well, nothing ever breaks into my environment. No, almost always there's malware that is living and thriving in your environment that you don't know about because you don't know the dwell time. The antivirus software is not telling you the dwell time, but how long something was in your environment, which could be, again, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, before it finally detects and removes it. So here it is. I'm giving away part of the keys of the kingdom here. The number one way that most companies are compromised is social engineering. And it's been that way going on, I think, 13 years now, or unpatched software. Social engineering accounts for 70 to 90% of all malicious data breaches. Unpatched software accounts for about 20 to 40%. There is some cross overlap there because many times the social engineering email, when you click on the link, it then tries to find out if you have unpatched software, so it can do a silent drive-by download. And then everything else added up all together is only 1 to 10% of the risk. And this should not be a surprise because it's been that way since I first got into computer security back in 1986, 87. Although back then, so when I first got in it in 1986, 87, social engineering was the number one cause for most exploits. It was for a couple of years. Then about the time that DOS and Windows was becoming really popular, unpatched software became the number one way. And it kind of the epiphany, or not the, I'm not thinking of epiphany, I'm thinking of apocryphy. I can't even say the word right. But the height of unpatched software was probably unpatched Oracle Java. I think back in 2007, Cisco said that unpatched Oracle Java in one of the reports was responsible for 91% of all breaches, web-based breaches alone, one software program. And yet every company I went to had unpatched Java everywhere, which is why it was the number one hit. Finally, the browser manufacturers, Microsoft and Apple, I think Apple was really kind of leading the way at the time in this. They started taking Java out of the browsers so that it couldn't be as exploited as such. And within a couple of months, all the rest of the browser manufacturers followed. Although I used to tell people, Java's not your problem, it's unpatched Java. You're not patching Java, that's your problem. But that kind of killed the Java exploits at the time. And about then, social engineering took over. And social engineering has been number one since about somewhere around 2007 to 2013. Somewhere in there, social engineering became number one, and it's never looked back because it's working really, really well. It works cross-platform with unpatched software and buffer overflow exploits. You've got to make different attacks for different types of machines, Apple versus Linux versus Windows. The social engineering, it works across everything. Even if you have a Google Chromebook, social engineering is going to work. But I also tell people that even though most companies, 70 to 90% of the risk is social engineering, and unpatched software is 20 to 40%, and together they equate to usually 90 to 99% of all attacks against most companies are those two things alone. Don't trust me. I work for a company that sells anti-social engineering, anti-phishing software and services. I should be telling you that, right? I work for them, but I want to say, ask yourself in your own experiences when your computers were compromised when your own personal computers were compromised by malware or hackers, how did they get in? It was probably social engineering, unpatched software, or your company that you work for. How are most of the compromises done? Or even when you hear in the news media, right? When you hear that Equifax has been taken over, right? How was that done? That was unpatched Apache struts, or Travelex. What was that? It was unpatched VPN software. Most of the time it's social engineering. I was talking to an FBI agent the other day, and she said she in her 20-year career had only seen one attack that didn't involve some type of social engineering aspect. And I'll go further and just say that in my at least 20 years of hands-on incident response, I only had one client where it wasn't social engineering and unpatched software. It was a SQL injection exploit, and that was like 10 or 15 years ago, so it's been a long time. But the key is that you need to figure out what are your own biggest initial root breach causes, and that's what I'm going to help you do today. You need to figure it out and close those holes. Social engineering, most of the time it's coming through you through email, right? You get this email telling you to download this document or click on this link, or you go to a compromised website or compromised banner ad. So it's some website you go to innocently, and it's like, oh, you need to you need to get the Apache Adobe patch update, or you need to click here to update your Google Chrome browser or something like that. So those two are the most frequent reasons, most frequent causes of social engineering. SMS messages, short messaging services on cell phones, that's becoming more popular. Almost everybody I know is now getting spam and phishing on SMS on their phone at some time, although most of it tends to be spam where they're trying to sell you Viagra or something like that. It's not phishing as much on SMS, but that's becoming very popular. Any type of instant messaging client, especially over social media, is certainly becoming big phishing attacks, right? It happens in Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff. People are like, oh, go here, go there. We're seeing a lot of voice call phishing. That's where it used to be. The most popular one was the fake Microsoft phone call, where somebody from India or Pakistan or something was calling you to tell you that, oh, we're from Microsoft, and we detected that you have a virus and we want to help you. I'll always laugh because I'm like, Microsoft doesn't proactively call anybody. Right? Too much money. And even if you called them, you'd have a hard time spending your money to get them to help you with your computer virus. But anyways, we're seeing a lot more voice call phishing, things like where they claim that they're from your bank, or they claim they're from Marriott or from your airline company, and they'll act like they're helping you. Oh, you've been compromised. Like Mr. Grimes, did you buy 2 plane tickets from Dallas to Korea? You didn't. No, we didn't think you did, and we blocked those transactions. But we see $30,000 of other transactions last night that we don't think you spent. And don't worry, we're going to put them on a hold, but we just need to verify you are who you say you are. So if you could tell us your login name, good. Tell us your password. And Mr. Grimes, we're going to send you a code on SMS. So you need to tell us the code that is sent to you so we can verify you are who you say you are. What you don't know is they've actually put your account in recovery mode. You give them the code, they take over your account, spend all the money. And of course, people can be socially engineered in person by scam artists and the like. I think one of the best things anybody can do in any company is to teach themselves and their employees how to spot malicious URLs. I've written an article on it, got a webinar, there's a PDF document you can download that's referenced in either one of those, but teaching you and your employees and coworkers how to spot rogue bad URLs is going to stop a whole lot of phishing, and it's one of the best things I think anybody can do is to educate their employees on how to spot them and tell the difference between a legitimate and illegitimate URL. On browsing, on patching, the most common type of software that needs to be patched or that is attacked and should be patched is internet-facing software. No big surprise there, although it's a little bit different based upon whether we're talking clients versus server. On the clients, it's browser add-ins. So that's, it used to be Java, now it's Adobe Acrobat or Flash or something like that. Or it could be your add-ins, your Google Chrome add-ins get compromised. It could be your network advertising services and daemons. So that's software that's listening on the network for someone to connect to it. So that would be like RDP, Windows Remote Desktop Protocol. It would be like your remote management software. It would be like your administrative consoles, those things get attacked a lot because they're listening and the attackers are trying to connect to them and buffer overflow them. And let me say that in my 20 years of professional penetration testing, I never saw an administrative console that was fully patched. They were always unpatched and I could break into them. Operating systems are certainly attacked a whole lot. You got to keep your operating system patched. For a lot of years, for about 10 years, back in the early 2000s and 2000, probably up to about 2015, operating system bugs were not in the top 10 reasons why people were broken into. But about 2015, they started to be attacked again a whole lot, and today are in the top 10. But usually operating systems are not attacked a whole lot because they're usually auto-patched. So usually it's browser add-ins and the network advertising daemons, services daemons. And productivity apps like Microsoft Office, people will get these rogue documents they're told to download. They're told that it's a PDF, but really it's a Word document, and they're told, hey, bypass the permissions and things like that. They could also have like buffer overflow made documents. Although when I was with Microsoft for 12 years, although it's been a couple of years ago before I came to KnowBe4, the average Microsoft Office program that was exploited had not been patched in over 5 years. People just didn't apply patches for some reason. I don't know if I'm blaming Microsoft at that point. If you have a server, the most attacked thing on any server that's exposed to the internet is web server-based software. Just like, again, like with Equifax, where it's Apache struts, or it could be, IIS for someone's, usually it's a programming bug with a website or something like that. It's not normally, it can be because you haven't patched the web server software, but it's many times because there's some type of programming bug on the application that's running on the web server. Again, operating system is attacked. Database software is frequently attacked. Oracle has like 100+ bugs a year, so it gets attacked a whole lot. Microsoft SQL doesn't have many bugs. I mean, I think in the last 10 years, it's had a handful of bugs. It's really pretty solid. But you could have a misconfiguration where someone does something like a SQL injection attack or something like that. Even though by default, those are closed down, but people are all the time misconfiguring. Or it could be the management software. We see that a whole lot. The RDP is attacked. The VNC connection is attacked. The Compact Insight Manager, if you're old enough to remember that. But it's usually these management software programs, VPNs and things like that, that management is using to be able to connect to those servers. They're listening, and so attackers. So I would ask yourself, do you know what your top unpatched threats are? These are the most commonly attacked things. But it never hurts to figure out what are the top vulnerabilities being exploited at this time. It's better if you have your own list from your antivirus software that tells you, or your own patch. If you get your own patch management software that tells you what is being successfully attacked the most that's not patched. But I downloaded this list here from just a top 10 list, off the internet from one of the big vendors, Checkpoint. And I was kind of shocked here to see that number one was MV-powered DVR remote control execution. So DVR, digital video recording devices, meaning, probably security cameras and stuff like that. So that tells me that it's IoT attacks against security cameras that they're then putting into bots and bot networks to do denial of service attacks and attack other machines. But I was kind of shocked on that one. Or look at the next, number two is Heartbeat, information disclosure. It's from 2014. That's number two most exploited vulnerability, something that should have been patched in 2014. Come on, guys. And so on and so on. You see number three is a web server exploit. Number four is a router authentication bypass, and so on. So you'll see, and Apache struts, which got Equifax a couple years ago. Look at that. It's still number 6. So it isn't just Equifax, right? There's a lot of people being hit by it. So that's what I would say to do, is that if you're trying to figure out what to patch, it's the internet facing stuff that gets attacked. I gave you a list of what I think is attacked the most long term, but also download your latest top 10 list, and that should give you see if you have those things. Like, do you have the MV powered DVR remote code execution? That one's tough because a lot of web cameras have that vulnerability, but they don't call it MV power. The webcam is not called MV power, but if you look in the webcam, it will tell you that it's an MVP power thing. And many times the web security cameras, the vendors from Asian countries and stuff, I don't know why, but they just don't update it like ever. I've got security cameras that I finally had to turn off because they were not patched. They had multiple vulnerabilities and hadn't been patched in like 3 years. And the vendor was not releasing, they're like, oh, buy new cameras. Well, I'm not going to buy new cameras from a vendor that doesn't update their firmware so that I have to turn off my security cameras to protect my family. But again, bigger is determining how malware is breaking in. antivirus software, anti-malware software, intrusion or endpoint detection and response software might tell you in the moment, like when malware is being downloaded from the browser, detects it, it might alert the user. It may or may not, but a lot of times all it does is put it on a report. But the trick is that, most of the time, with very few exceptions, they don't tell you when they detect something finally how long it had been dwelling or executed before they finally detected and removed it. So they don't tell you the full life cycle detection. Again, some software does. There's a lot of good software out there, like Microsoft ATP and CrowdStrike and stuff, that once you go digging and looking, they'll tell you. And they may even give you a proactive alert, but they're not doing it on everything. And I'm going to teach you how to do it on everything. The first key is to know that and let me say, none of them, not even Microsoft ADP or CrowdStrike, will tell you how the malware breaks in. They'll tell you that malware broke in when it broke in, but not how it broke in. And it's very important to know how it broke in. Know that most malware only breaks in using one method. So you should try to create, and I'm going to tell you a way to figure it out today, of detecting or tracking the first execution of that malware, that hacker breaking in and where. A good thing you can do is look at your logs. The Verizon data breach investigation reports say something like 70 to 90% of all malicious intrusions would have been detected early if people had just looked at their logs. So many times, picking up all your security event logs and analyzing them in an intelligent way can tell you when something first executed. I'm going to tell you how to do that today. You can also do a little research. If you don't know how something's breaking in, remember that most malware only breaks in using one method, so you can do a little research on the malware program that's identified by your software and removed and figure it out. End user may be able to tell you. A lot of times, what I tell companies, if you have no other way to figure out how malware is breaking in, ask your end user. Go say, Bob, we detected malware in your system yesterday. Do you know how it got in there? And Bob will, so about half the time, they kind of know. They're like, oh, I was on my friend's social media website, and I got this fake email pretending to be from my friend, telling me to go look at this car racing video, and it asked me to download this video codec to watch the video, and that's when my machine started getting slow. That probably was it. I was socially engineered in Trojan software. Or if no other way, most companies have software and hardware inventories, and when something's detected, like malware is detected, get a list of all the machines where the malware is detected and see if there's any commonalities in the hardware or software. Is it happening more on Windows machines versus Mac machines versus Linux machines versus Google Chromebooks? Is it happening on 32-bit machines more than 64-bit? Is it happening on Windows 10 more than Windows 7, and so on and so on? Is it happening on machines that happen to have unpatched Java or Adobe Acrobat or Google Chrome or a particular Google Chrome plugin? If you're doing an accurate software hardware inventory, and you're figuring out when malware is detected and removed, you'll start to see commonalities, and will help you to close those holes. So again, remember this, most malware only breaks in using one method. Almost the vast majority of it is social engineering through emails and compromised websites. It also could be because of unpatched internet-facing software. A lot of times, like internet WebKit bots will actually, you click on the link and then they'll actually try like 5 or 10 different software programs to see if you have unpatched software programs, and if so, they will silently infect your system. But if you're fully patched, then they'll give you this little prompt going, hey, you need to install the Google Chrome update or something like that. There could be password guessing. A lot of malware programs guess at 100 different common passwords, or maybe they found your password or old password on a password dump website somewhere. So most malware only breaks in using one method. Some malware exploit kits are kind of dying in popularity because patching is becoming better and social engineering is becoming more frequent. So you won't see as many malware exploit kit bots anymore. But if you do, they typically only use a few basic exploits each year, like one exploit, or maybe the most I've ever seen is maybe 5 to 8 exploits. So again, if you find like a malware exploit kit bot, you can go find out exactly what unpatched software that it could possibly exploit to see, does that exist in your environment and was it unpatched? If not, it was probably social engineering. So what I tell people to do, and literally this will take you 45 minutes to an hour to figure out how is stuff breaking into your environment. If you don't have systems that tell you, and most people don't, then you can literally do 45 minutes, hour of research and get the answer. So what I tell people to do is you should print out your daily or monthly anti-malware report. Everybody's anti-malware software has a report to talk about the malware it detected and removed and that sort of stuff. Won't tell you how long it dwelled before it got detected and removed, but they'll give you the names that they detected and removed, and gather together the top 10 identified malware programs. Or essentially, you want to try to get like 90% of the malware names, or 90% of malware that is trying to break into your environment or did break into your environment. You can use antivirus vendor reports for stuff out in the wild or in the world, but it's better if you use your own information. You want to find out what is it, you want to see what's being detected and removed in your environment. Like here's an example. Now in this case, I just asked Checkpoint, what is the top 10 malware programs they're detecting worldwide? It'd be better if it was your report, but I'm just going to use their report because I don't want to reveal KnowBe4's report. But we're going to assume this is your personal AV monthly report saying here's the top 10 programs we're detecting and removing. Things like Agent Tesla, which is a remote access Trojan, or Morphia, or Morphiex is the botnet downloader that distributes other malware programs, and so on and so on. XMRig is a Bitcoin mining software that tries to mine, not Bitcoin, Monero, and so on and so on. So here's the top 10 here. If this was my report, I would figure out, well, what are the percentages that those programs are, being detected and removed in your environment? You want to try to capture at least 90%, maybe up to 99 or 100% of the malware that's being detected and removed in your system, and then do a little research. So you do a little research. In this case, like I did Agent Tesla, I looked up, and it actually looks like it's mostly social engineering it's delivered with email attachments these days. Or when I took this screenshot, it was coming across the COVID-19 stuff. We're actually seeing a decrease in the COVID-related phishing emails right now. But it also said that recent Agent Tesla campaigns have exploited unpatched Microsoft Office vulnerabilities. So it's really a combination of social engineering and possibly unpatched software. So it's a little bit unusual. With Agent Tesla, could be two different types of attack vectors. And you want to do the same thing for all the other malware that's out there that you've detected in your monthly antivirus report. So I kind of act like I do this here. You can see a lot of it's social engineering, but it's also like XMRig is almost always unpatched web server software. And we'll see one of them, Forfeix, says that it can also come across Skype and removable media drives, and so on and so on. And TrickBot could also come across unpatched software and network file shares. And we'll say RAM it. We're just going to say we don't know what RAM it is, because you don't always know how the malware is breaking in. Although if you don't know, it's usually social engineering. But let's say that we didn't know. And then you can kind of add them up and go, okay, how much, if my company is fully patched or doesn't have any of the vulnerabilities of those programs, so we're fully patched in Office, for example, and our web server software is fully patched, that meant all those things came in due to social engineering of some type. And if I add all those things up there, 74%, almost 3/4 of all the malware that was detected in this theoretical environment would have come in through social engineering. Plus you could have had some stuff coming in through from like USB keys or network share issues or something like that. If you're not fully patched, you could say, well, up to half of it could be related to unpatched software, depending on what you find. But if you think you're fully patched or fairly good patched, then hey, 3/4 of it is due to patches. Once you figure out what your top root cause exploit methods are, you then want to create what I call the 3x3 security control pillars. You want to create security controls to close those gaps. So you want to make the best policies that you can to close those gaps. You want the best technical defenses that you can buy and afford. And technical defenses, that's like your firewalls, your content filtering, that sort of stuff. In your education, you always have to educate your employees, because the bad stuff will always get past your technical defenses. And you're trying to prevent the things from breaking in the first place. So you want controls to prevent things from breaking in the first place. You want to then have early warning detection if something does get past your preventative controls. And then you want incident response and good recovery. So again, every time you find, whether it's social engineering, unpatched software, bad password hygiene, insider threat, whatever it happens to be. You want to make up security controls that will prevent, detect, and recover from a particular type of attack, initial root cause exploit, and have the best policies, technical defenses, and education to help people fight those issues. So that's the way 3x3 security control pillars on what you find out is your number one. And again, this only took me in my theoretical example when I was trying to see how does malware break in my theoretical example, it only took me 45 minutes of research plus some add, subtracting, dividing, and addition. I again recommend that you use your own anti-malware reports if you can. You can rely on external third-party vendors about what's going on in the world, but nothing beats your company's own local experiences. And try your best to determine the root cause exploit based upon the evidence. But if you don't, then you can do some research, right? You can try to figure it out. And if you don't know what it is, you can just assume that it's your top two root causes are likely to be social engineering and unpatched software, because those have been the number one and number two root cause exploits for the whole 33 years I've been in computer security. It's it's probably going to be at least for another 10 years. Maybe one day we'll have something like a cloud infecting virus come out. But right now, and what's been for a long time, social engineering, unpatched software, that's where you have to do most of the focus of your defenses and controls. Although occasionally, like when Configure came out, Configure's been a long time, when the Configure Trojan came out, that for a long time, for about 2 years, we were seeing a lot of infected USB keys and auto runs and that sort of stuff. And now we're starting to see that MVP power exploit, which is going into unpatched video cameras. So different exploits, use different methods, and depending on what you find out, you may need to adjust your strategy. It may not always be social engineering and unpatched software. It could be, it could be like unpatched video cameras and you can't patch them. And what do you do then? Well, maybe I put them on a separate VPN, or I get the cameras from another vendor, or whatever your particular mediation might be. We're also big believers in that no matter how good your policies are, no matter how good your technical defenses are, you need to train your end users with good security awareness training. You train them and tell them how to recognize badness and what to do when they see it, which is hopefully report it and delete it and not open it, that they should always hover over URLs before they click them and things like that. And then you do periodic simulated phishing tests, phishing campaigns against them to see, and you test them. And it's actually part of the training. We used to wonder a long time ago, how do you best train end users to prevent being, socially engineered? We know what the answer is. It is at least monthly testing and monthly training. You want to do monthly training. Usually when someone gets hired or the new employee, you give them longer training, somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes. And then every month you give them something shorter, maybe a minute or two or up to 5 minutes. And then every year they get a longer training. And then every month you do simulated phishing campaigns to test and make it again as part. You want to kind of gamify them recognizing phishing, whether it's real or real phishing or simulated phishing, and reporting that to you and finding out who your phish-prone people are and decreasing that. We do know that if you do what I just said, that the average company goes from an initial baseline of phish-prone percent. Usually in most companies, about 38% of their employees will click on any phish that you send their way. Some companies are higher, some are lower, but it averages about 38%. And if you train them and do simulated phishing accounts tests, you will get them below 5% in under a year. So that's that's not the best companies. That is every company that follows what I just said, which is monthly training and simulated phishing tests, at least monthly, if not a little bit more. You can significantly reduce your risk by training employees. So again, not only do we want to know how it broke in, but how long was it in? Again, because malware, before it's detected and removed, it can be doing all kinds of things in your network. It can be planting ransomware. It can be encrypting drives. It can be stealing your data and exfiltrating it. It can be stealing your employees and customer passwords. Till the malware is detected and removed, that's where your biggest risk is. And again, if you've never seen these types of tests, you can go to virustotal.com. That's owned by Google, virustotal.com, and they have 75 antivirus engines there. And every virus, every malware program I've ever submitted to it, maybe a third or 2/3 of the engines detect stuff. And it usually takes, anytime there's new malware out there, and there's hundreds of millions of new malware programs all the time. It usually takes most antivirus engines a couple of hours to a couple of days to start detecting. And I would say a couple of days is a lot more realistic. So again, you may think, well, we never have viruses, we never have malware that's escaped on our network. Most of the time you do. Most companies do have malware that is loose on their network, on the machines and devices in their environment before it gets detected and removed. Like the MV Power exploit that's on cameras. Are you even scanning your IoT security cameras? Most companies aren't. So it's really important that when malware is detected, that you try to figure out where it was. Was it on a machine no one really cared about, some type of public kiosk, or maybe like a cafeteria computer, or was it on the CEO's computer or the CISO or your Salesforce administrator? Because that's the biggest risk. The biggest risk is when your malware is undetected. You want to know the dwell time, how long it was there, because when it's undetected, it can do anything. Longer is more risky. So my trick that I'm going to teach you today is to use an application control program and monitor audit only mode. Application control programs are known as whitelisting programs or blacklisting programs. They stop things from executing. Well, those are one of the best. Implementing a good application control program is one of the best things you can do to decrease security events in your environment. But to do it in what's called enforcement mode, where it really blocks stuff, can really takes a lot of work, takes a good team and months of preparation and deployment to do right. But to do it in monitor audit only mode, where all it does is write an event in the event log if it detects something new, you can just do that. You can just deploy it, and it never causes any problem with any. When I do this method and I deploy it in companies, I've never had it do anything negative. Of course, you should always test stuff, I guess. But again, at the companies where I've implemented this, where we've used application control programs and monitor audit only mode, I've never had a negative consequence. So I've never had anybody even notice it. Went later on, months or years later, I told the employees, oh yeah, we're monitoring everything that you're executing. They don't even know it. They open up their security log and like, oh, I can't believe it. So the trick is using that application control program, take a snapshot of a known clean system. So you don't want to snapshot and put in the rules baseline a malware program, but so you snapshot it while it's known to be clean. And what this does is create thousands of rules that the system knows, okay, these are the allowed programs and things that should be run. And then we really only want to pick up the events that detect newly executed programs, i.e. malware or hackers running their tools. Then you want to copy any of these new executions to a centralized database. And then whenever antivirus detects and removes malware, it should look to the application control database and see when that execution first happened. And that way you can, the difference between when it was removed and when it first executed is your dwell time. And then you can create reports and security workflows. So if something was only in for a second or a minute, it's not as risky as if it was in for 3 hours or 3 days. And depending on where it was it on the CEO's computer, the CISO's computer, or a database administrator's computer? That's a big deal. So once you get this information, you can create automated workflows into this. So again, application programs are known as blacklisting or whitelisting. Whitelisting means you only allow certain programs to run that are in your rules. Blacklisting means you allow everything to run, but not these programs. We're just going to use it in audit only mode versus blocking enforcement mode. And most of these application control programs, you can build rules by snapshotting a system. And then again, most will write events to security logs when new executions that are not in the rules or not on the baseline occur. Windows comes with has come with built-in application control programs since XP. It was called software restriction policies. Now it's called AppLocker, is the one we're going to talk about today. And there's also Windows Defender Application Control. Windows Defender Application Control is like a super serious one. And that one, you really got to know what you're doing. It's hardware hypervisor enforced and can be a lot more problematic if you really have to take your time to deploy that. Versus I can turn on AppLocker and put it in audit only mode and no one even notices that I did it. Most major antivirus vendors have a version application control program, Symantec and McAfee and all that stuff. There's commercial versions and I love them all. Beyond Trust, I'm a big fan of. Carbon Black picked up what was called the application control program they bought was called Bit9 Parity, and it was probably one of my favorite programs of my career. Now it's owned by Carbon Black. Tripwire is probably the original application control program, and it also works and has for decades in the Linux and Unix environments. Cisco has a version, Avanti has a version. They're all good. If you don't have any the commercial application control programs are the best. I mean, they really are fantastic. And the antivirus programs are pretty good too. The McAfee, the Semantics, the Trend Micros and stuff of the world, pretty good too. And if you don't have anything else, there's built-in versions as well on Windows. AppLocker is one that I recommend that we're going to use today. Open source versions, SE Linux, Secure Enhanced Linux, AppArmor, and FA Policy Daemon. They can be used to do application control, but I'll be honest with you, they don't work that well. They're not really well suited to it. You're kind of trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, but they're there. You can try to use them. I would encourage you to use some commercial version instead if you don't have something better that's on open source. Also, NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technologies, pushes a special publication 800-67 called Guide to Application Whitelisting that you can get to figure out how to do whitelisting. Although again, the example I'm going to show you today is just AppLocker, which has been in Windows 7 and Windows Server 2008 and later. It's easy to deploy. I'll show you in a minute. The thing to keep in mind is that AppLocker, it's application control program, but it doesn't have a true security boundary, meaning that Microsoft never intended it to be completely a security boundary, which means in practicality, there's about 3 ways that malware can execute and not get blocked by application locker. And they know that. If you want something that's a true security boundary, you want to use the other Windows Defender application control, because that is kick butt, hypervisor hardware enforced application control. But we're just going to show you how to do AppLocker, and you can configure AppLocker in standalone, like I'll show you to do, use group policy, or do a mobile device, management software like Microsoft Intune or something like that to do it. But I'm going to show you how to do it locally. If you have a Windows system and you opened up an administrative command prompt, you could type in gpedit.msc, and that brings up the local group policy editor. And then you open up the computer configuration container leaf, and then security settings leaf, and then application control policy leaf, and that's where the AppLocker rules live. You can set up 4 different types of rules: executable rules, which I'm going to show you today, which are the most important ones. Also, Windows installer rules allow Microsoft Windows installers, anything that's installed by their installers, to automatically install. Script rules, which are important to configure because there's a lot of scripts on Windows systems. Or package app rules would be some other third-party package application. And packaged app rules also work with what's called modern apps on Windows. So those are ones that can be tightly controlled. And each of these can be enabled and enforced or monitored separately. We're just going to do executable rules, but in reality, you should configure all 4 of them. But again, I'll show you when you're in Windows GP Edit, you can just right-click the AppLocker leaf object, choose properties, and it says, okay, which of these rules do you want to configure? In reality, you would do all 4. And instead of enforcing them, you would just say audit only, or what's known as monitoring only mode, because you don't want to block stuff. And then you can tell it to automatically generate rules. And when you do that, it will say, well, what do you want me to generate the rules? Who should they apply to? It should apply to everyone, because that way you'll capture malware no matter what security context it's in. They start by saying that they're only going to run the rules under C:\program files. Most malware is outside of that folder. So you want to put C:\/ in there, or if you've got a D drive, E drive, F drive, you'll put that particular root directory in there, then give it a name to identify it. I call it baseline rules or something like that. But again, the most important part is change it from the default of C:\program files to the root directory, then say next. And then it says, hey, how do you want me to create the rules? Create publisher rules for files that are digitally signed? Yes. So we'll look at digital certificates and digitally signed things. What's nice about that is, it will identify the program and it will update it even if the program's been updated or gets patched or something like that. You don't have to regenerate a rule. If you do hash rules, which says if the file's not signed, use hash rules, then it means every time the file is updated, you have to create and update the rules. That can be kind of a pain. Path rules, so I say, well, allow or deny everything based on this particular file path. That's kind of doesn't work really well, easy to get around. So these take the defaults, they're usually pretty good, which is say create publisher rules for files that are digitally signed, then do hashes for things that are not digitally signed. Usually if you're running AppLocker rule, snapshotting for the first time, it can take anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. When you get through, it creates about 2,500, 2,600 rules. You tell it to create it. It says, do you want to create default rules? say no. If you're doing enforcement, you would say yes, and that keeps your, a lot of people don't know how to set up the rules correctly, and they end up locking themselves out of Windows. You would typically say yes in enforcement mode, but we're going to say no because we want to catch everything that we might be able to monitor. And when you do that, it creates all these rules, 2,598 rules in this case. And essentially what it's going to do is say anything we've got a rule for that's allowed, but we want to catch these other things, these the events that aren't snapshotted. And then there's a service you need to enable for AppLocker. It's called Application Identity or App ID. I don't know why it's called App ID or Application Identity. It should just be called the AppLocker service. I don't know why they don't call it that, but then you need to turn that on. And then if you go in there, you'll have a new event log that shows on up. That event log in AppLocker here, you go down into the event logs and Windows event logs, and then you'll see right now we don't have any events until we try to execute something. And then what I'm going to show you in this video coming up is that I went to malshare.com. Do not go there unless you have permission from your organization to be there. That is full of tens of thousands of malware programs, real life malware programs. But I'm going to do it in the demo. I go to malshare.com and I download a ransomware program. I search for ransomware. It gives the MD5 hash, and that's how you have to request it by hash. And then you can download it. And I just looked for different types of ransomware programs, and I saw one that I liked, and eventually it was Kryptonite, just because I knew it was easy to run. So again, you get these different hashes of this. This is the Kryptonite. PE32 means it's a portable executable 32, which just means a Windows executable, so it's easy for me to execute for the demo. And it's called Cryptic Ransomware. Then you click on download. It asks you to put in the hash of what you want to pull for the download. And then it will give me this, it gives you the malware name by hash. And I usually rename it and call it like Cryptic Ransomware. I usually misspell it a little bit so I don't override something if I downloaded it before. And there in my demo, I get this cryptic ransomware.exe. When I run it, Windows is like, hey, be careful, this is not signed. It's not telling me that it's malware, but it's just telling me that it's not signed. And I'm going to say run anyways. That's kind of nice where smart screen's trying to prevent me from being infected. And really, cryptic, a lot of ransomware hangs around for weeks or days or months before it executes. Cryptic ransomware for the demo, it literally kicks in about 10 or 20 seconds. It's a pretty quick thing. And I just want to show you how it would look and what it would create in the event log. It even creates a new executable called, it's a malicious executable called Client Server Runtime Beta Results Mega Pump Rhetoric. And it claims it was made by Facebook. It even has the name CSRSSS.exe. That's the name of a real Windows executable, but that's usually under Windows System 32, not under Program Data Windows. So that's an entirely Trojan program of the ransomware program. When I use Process Explorer to submit this to sysinternals of sysinternals.com, it told me that 58 of the 72 antivirus engines detected this as a bad program. But let's act like it didn't, like we didn't have any antivirus programs that detected it yet. What we're really looking for is any unrecognized execution that wasn't in the snapshot rules that we clicked and generated previously. And essentially in AppLocker, it creates these 8,003 events saying, hey, this program was allowed to run, but would have been prevented if you had AppLocker in enforcement mode. And what you want to capture is the name of the file, the location, the computer that it's on, the time that that event for the first execution was logged, and what user was in, what computer was in, and so on. And then every time you get 8,003 events, you download those into a common database. And then every time an antivirus program detects malware and removes it, you compare it against the 8,003 event. So every time it's detected, you're going to generate what the dwell time is, and then you can create lots of security workflows that say things like, if it was on a system longer than a couple of minutes, we're going to send an email. Maybe we're going to send an email to the victim. Here's an example email maybe coming from the help desk. Is this automated alert? This is what I help set up at a lot of different companies where we'll say, hey, Bob or Roger, did you know we detected malware in your system this date and time? Our monitoring tools discovered this malware is active for 3 days on your computer before it's detected and removed. You need to bring your computer device to IT security. We'll clean it or reformat it. And just think about all the places and all the passwords you used for the last 3 days, whether it's personal or professional, those passwords can be compromised and so on and so on. So the nice thing is by detecting dwell time, you can then figure out and get a list and reports of the longest dwell times, what are the types of machines, high value assets that you found dwell time on, and you can actually do like a growing dwell time average over time. And if your antivirus software starts allowing longer and longer dwell times before detection, you can contact the vendor, give them the list of files that are taking longer to detect. And when we've done this, the antivirus vendors actually respond and decrease the dwell time, which decreases risk in your environment. So again, the big thing is that with your security workflows, you also want to tie back to how, to your training, to your 3x3 security pillars to stop that malware from, anytime malware gets in, if it doesn't get detected right away, there's a gap in your security defenses. And so you want to use the data that you're now collecting, but how it breaks in and how long it was in to figure out how to modify your training and technical controls and policies to decrease the risk. That's the key takeaway. Anybody can do this. You can implement this when I do this and help companies do it. It only takes a day to implement all the pieces. And then you've got really good information you can use to significantly reduce the risk of malware in your environment, because you're finding out how it broke in, where it broke in, and how long it dwelled before it was detected and removed, and what risk does that mean to your environment. So what we're going to run now is this demo just to show you how to configure AppLocker and how I downloaded the malware, the real live malware detection. And if you set it up in your environment, you can do the same, but make sure you get permission before you go to malshare.com. And with that, I'm going to let you watch the video for a couple of minutes, and then I'll be right back. So let's see how a real life demonstration of AppLocker would work if you were to implement it. So you first have to start with enabling AppLocker and using gpedit.msc. Here, let me maximize this. The first thing you have to do is turn it on. You do that by right-clicking AppLocker under Application Control Policies. Try that again. Here we go. And what you would do is say configure. You don't want to do audit only, configure, audit only, configure, audit only, configure, audit only. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then you want to create the executable rules, the generate, do a baseline. And what you can do is this automatically generate rules. This is going to, if I was to do it right now in the demo, it could take, because I'm running a virtual machine, it could take up to several minutes. It's far easier to just import a policy that you've already created. I have one that I've created, and you could do the same thing in real life. Once you've done it once, you can import the policy settings and rules to any other workstation. And it says, hey, I'm going to import the policy. It will permanently replace all existing policy rules. Yes, usually it tells me it adds 415 rules. If I go back into AppLocker, I'll see that it still has setting with rules or audit only. And if I go under executable rules, I now have 415 rules that are kind of the baseline for my machine. We then have to enable AppLocker. To do that, we have to turn on a service, if I can spell right, the App Identity Service, Application Identity Service. I start that service, and now AppLocker is running. We can look in the event logs. I'll turn on Event Viewer. And we'll go look for the AppLocker log. And there's our AppLocker logs. You can kind of see in the experience that we don't have any events yet. So we're not going to get any events till we get exceptions to our rules. So now let's go generate some exceptions to our rules. To our AppLocker rules. I'm going to go to Malshare. This is a site. If you've never been there, you shouldn't go there if you haven't told your system administrator about it. This is a site that has tens of thousands of malware samples that anybody can run. It's updated all the time. Anybody could go to it. It's a place I go to just to get malware to do demonstrations. But you can find malware on it. It's called malshare.com. Again, make sure you get permission before you go there, because you can certainly cause sysadmins and security types to freak out and panic. But I'm going to look for ransomware. Always love to see what ransomware is out there these days that we can run. Here we go. So now we've got lots of ransomware back. Here's one called Cryptic. I can go to, and it will tell me When you're doing demos of the malware, you try to find stuff that's executables and things like this. This is a ransomware that has a keylogger in it. It hooks Windows. It messes with your files. It messes with your registry. It steals passwords. But it's a PD, a portable executable 32. That just kind of lets me know it's an executable that I can easily execute for the demo. Then you have to request and download it from Malshare. You do that by copying the key. So then I can pull a sample of that and run it. So I can submit and do my pull. It then has the malware sample here. I'll do a save as. It downloads it as a text document. I'm going to say, hey, this is cryptic ransomware. I misspell it just so I know that it's there. Here it is. It looks like a TXT, but it really is an executable. So I'll rename it. Oh, gotta tell it to show extensions so I can rename the extension correctly. Show the file extensions. There we go. Now I've got cryptic ransomware. Do a rename, and instead of it being a TXT, we'll call it an EXE since that's what it is. And again, we're going to look on the app locker event log here. I'm going to do a refresh. You many times have to do refreshes on the event logs, but see, I've got some operations here of new. This is just telling me that it allowed certain executables to run. Those are fine. What we're looking for is 8003, which are the new things that showed up. 1802s or events that had just shown me stuff that was allowed to run, and that app locker policy got applied. So then we're going to run the cryptic ransomware now. It's running. Windows in this case is freaking out a little bit. I'm going to tell it to ignore it. I want to run it anyways. And it's actually cryptic ransomware is running around trying to collect my passwords on this virtual machine and doing all kinds of devious stuff before it locks me up. Cryptic ransomware is not one of those that takes a long time to encrypt. It does it fairly quickly. I'm going to refresh my event logs again. And we'll see an 8003 warning on here. And when I run it, it's like, oh, this cryptic ransomware executable was allowed to run, but would have been prevented from running if the app locker policy was enforced. So this is what you're looking for. You would pick up this 1830 event, take it to your centralized database server, and then when this this ransomware finally got detected and removed by your antivirus or endpoint detection response program, you would then create some type of automated process or alerting. But it tells you when it launched, when it was logged. It just happened a few seconds ago or a minute ago, but this is you would record the computer that it was on, what user was running, and the time and date, and then compare that against what your anti-malware when it finally detected it, stopped it, and removed it. So that's really the keys to the whole kingdom, everybody. Kind of cool, huh? And I'm kind of running out of time. I want to get to questions. Just know that we have a lot of cool free security tools. If you go to KnowBe4.com/resources, we have cool free security tools, lots of cool white papers like the Ransomware Hostage Rescue Manual that I helped write, or the 12 Ways to Hack Two-Factor Authentication. That's a really cool 40-page ebook. And I think it actually has 18 ways of how to hack multi-factor authentication. We're going to take a couple of questions. I know we're running out of time here. I apologize. I talk fast and I still ran out of time. If we don't get to your question today, if you email me at rogerg@knowbe4.com, I promise I will respond to your question within 24 hours. And with that, David, can we take as many questions as we can get in the next 2 minutes?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great presentation, Roger. Just an incredible flood of fantastic content and excellent advice on what we can do to protect ourselves. First question here, they're asking, have you seen bad websites that still use HTTPS?
Yeah, almost all of them. So it used to be that HTTPS means that the website has a valid, or if you get the little lock icon on your browser, means that you have a valid, the website has a valid registered domain that attaches to the TLS digital certificate, and that you have an encrypted communications, and that the URL that you're connected to is the URL that's being displayed. Turns out like 90% of all malicious websites now have TLS certificates, and that's because there's free digital certificate download sites like Let's Encrypt that allow anybody to download a certificate and use it. And Let's Encrypt even tells you that they don't check to see who's malicious and who's not. So since the free digital certificate websites came out, most malicious websites are signed with a TLS certificate and have HTTPS. HTTPS does not mean that the website isn't malicious.
Very interesting. Good to know. Next question. I'm sure you probably heard this one before. What antivirus software do you recommend?
I don't recommend any of them. And let me say that there's a lot of great ones out there, but none of them are 100% like they always claim. What I think is run any of them run whatever one you want to use, one that works for you and your company and doesn't slow down the computers too much. But do what I talked about today in addition to that, because all anti-malware software will miss stuff and the dwell time can be minutes, hours, days. Even the best ones don't know everything right away. So if you follow my advice about using application control program and audit only mode, it can help you detect everything that gets executed.
Excellent. And then next question, does the method you talked about in your presentation catch fileless malware?
Mostly, yes. So fileless malware, even though it's fileless, doesn't use files. It does usually modify registry settings or something like that. There's always some auto startup way that it can execute and find stuff. And most of the time it doesn't care how it's logged, it's that it executed. Almost all of it always has to execute, even to infect another process or something like that. And the application control program will usually catch it. Depends on which application control program you use, but most of them catch it. Fileless malware is not some big, oh my God. We've been detecting fileless malware for 3 decades, and there's a lot of hype about how dangerous it is, and that sort. It is dangerous, but it's actually faster to find something in memory than it is on the disk, so it's not some big scary thing.
Very nice. Well, Roger, I'm afraid that's all the time we have in our webinar today for Q&A, but again, it's been a real pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, and thanks everybody.
And with that, I want to announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. That's going out to Jeff Mayfield from Arkansas. That's right, Arkansas. Congratulations to Jeff Mayfield. We'll reach out to you to deliver your gift card. Best of luck to everyone else on future events. In fact, after this event, you'll be automatically redirected to our website where you can check out upcoming events. Hope to see you on the next event. And of course, like Roger said, reach out to him at rogerg@knowbe4.com directly, and he'll respond to you within 24 hours with questions. The folks over at KnowBe4 are just awesome in what they do. Really great security awareness training, and they can totally change your company's security posture. So knowbe4.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great day.